The year 2020. So many games played this year, so much more unexpected free time to play them in. The pandemic did help clear out some of my backlog and offer some extra time to play more video games than I normally would, but damn, I haven't been to a bar since March. As a way to say goodbye to the year, I wanted to reflect on some of the games I enjoyed, so I narrowed it down and I came up with a top 5 list of the best games that I played during 2020. When I think about video games that I've played in the past, I usually associate the year that I played them in, and not necessarily the year they came out. So that's why for this list, I'm including games that I've played this year, but they didn't necessarily need to come out this year. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the list. Number 5, Persona 4 Golden. I have a love-hate relationship with this game. The story, characters, gameplay are all fantastic. The story especially was awesome. Basically, it's a teen murder mystery set in a small town. The story and the social simulation aspects were all great enough to get my wife equally invested in the game, even though she was just watching me play secondhand. What I really didn't like, though, were the dungeons. The dungeons are all super repetitive, and sometimes they can take a really long time. To add to that, the music in them, it just really wasn't that much to sing about in comparison to the rest of the soundtrack, which is amazing. Another thing is that maxing out your social links, it doesn't add anything new to the game gameplay-wise. It's just more experience for your Persona fusions. Now, all these issues that I had with Persona 4, they were all addressed in Persona 5, which is probably one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. If I had played Persona 5 Royal this year, I think it would definitely be in my top 5. Number 4, Final Fantasy XIII. This game originally came out in 2009, and I distinctly remember at that time having zero interest in ever playing the game. I had just passed it off as a hallway simulator, even though I was a big fan of the Final Fantasy series. Now that all changed when I finally decided to play Final Fantasy XIII earlier this year. I had my expectations in check, and I knew what I was getting into. And man, did I like this game a lot more than I thought I would. First off, the one thing you cannot criticize this game for is how well the story is paced. There is not a second of downtime in the game. As you play, the only thing you are doing is just moving that story along. There is absolutely no filler in this game. And I really think it worked out for the game's benefit because there is so much story to tell, and you really never feel like the game is wasting your time. In fact, I think this is one of the most easy to follow stories in any Final Fantasy that I've played. While still being batshit insane, don't get me wrong. But understanding the story is helped out a lot by the data log. And the data log is basically an in-game Wikipedia about everything you need to know about what the hell is going on in the story. I can absolutely see how the data log could become contentious among certain gamers, but it really helped cut down the amount of exposition and the amount of dialogue dedicated to just explaining all these different concepts. You could just read it in the data log. In fact, it's probably best I didn't play it back when it first came out because I don't think I would have read the data log and would not enjoy the game as much as I did. Yeah, there are a ton of hallways, but they do look really nice, and they are aesthetically varied. Overall, it didn't take anything away from my enjoyment in this game. Number 3, Fire Emblem Three Houses. What a good game. I had randomly bought this on a Black Friday sale at GameStop for $35. I didn't get it for almost 3 weeks, and I sort of forgot about it. When it arrived, I was confused at first because I just wasn't expecting it. But man, oh man, am I glad Past Me was able to buy this wonderful game. Fire Emblem is a strategy RPG with a Persona-esque social simulation aspect to it. In Fire Emblem, you play as a professor at a university that's basically the Hogwarts, but for knights. First off, I love this setting. This fixes the issue I had with the Persona games. How the game is set during high school and there's these weird, kind of uncomfortable parts just because that all the characters are underage. Fire Emblem flips that entirely on its head and makes it set during college, and you're the professor. It's a subtle change that I really appreciated, and it actually had a gameplay consequence because you're mentoring your students and kind of directing them how they're going to grow and level up. It really adds to the gameplay in a natural way. Speaking of gameplay, the gameplay in Fire Emblem is so compelling. You can change the class of each character, and each class will determine how they play on the battlefield. Once I learned how the class changing system worked, I was invested in how each of the characters would grow and how I wanted to allocate their stats. And this aspect is what really made the game click for me. I also appreciated all of the in-game explanations for different game mechanics. Class changes are just certifications and they have to pass a test to get into the next level. Battalions, they're basically additional special moves that you can equip, and then the Divine Pulse mechanic, which is basically an undo button that you can use in battles. This is explained at the very opening of the game. The battles sometimes can take a little while, at least for me, sometimes over 40 minutes just for one battle. I didn't have a big problem with that, but it can make it boring to watch, as attested by my wife. Number 2. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Talk about anticipation. I was looking forward to this game for a long time, and it did not disappoint. When I think of Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think of a dead car battery, because when I went to go pick it up from Best Buy, my car battery died. But another thing I think about is the battle system. In my opinion, this game has the best modern JRPG battle system out right now. It blends turn-based and real-time in a way that makes battles super engaging. This game is difficult too. It really requires you to have a basic understanding of how to play, or else you'll die, even on normal difficulty. Don't even get me started on hard mode. The Hell House fight, specifically on hard, is probably the most challenging thing I've done this year. The story in Final Fantasy VII Remake is controversial, but I think it worked. Without spoiling too much, they made a unique explanation of how they were going to continue the story of Final Fantasy VII without undermining the story of the original PS1 release. Even though I appreciated this approach to the storytelling, I really hope Nomura stops here with all the crazy shit. One other thing I didn't like about the game was how often it made you mess with your balls. Number 1. Spelunky 1 and Spelunky 2. Now, I actually started playing Spelunky 1 back in 2013, and I've played it fairly consistently since then. But it wasn't until earlier this year when I was finally able to beat Hell in Spelunky 1, and that's the true final area of the game. This was done with the help of my friend, who very early on in the year got into Spelunky, and his enthusiasm got me really back into it. We played so much of this game over Parsec, we really learned to hone in our skills. My first Hell win was one of my favorite memories of this year, and I honestly can't believe that was this year. Spelunky 2, for obvious reasons, was probably my most anticipated game this year, and it didn't disappoint. It wasn't just more of the same either. In fact, I would say it's a very different game in a lot of ways compared to the first Spelunky. If there's one word I could use to describe Spelunky 2 compared to Spelunky 1, it would be more. More enemies, more biomes, more items. Spelunky 2 is bigger overall, which can make runs last a little longer than the first one. For a Hell equivalent run, the time difference is like 35 to 40 minutes in Spelunky 1 versus an hour or more in Spelunky 2. And don't even get me started on Cosmic Ocean runs. The longer runs, plus the game's emphasis on instant kills, makes me prefer Spelunky 1 over 2, but both games are amazing, and you can't go wrong with playing either. It's also worth noting that both of these games are coming to Switch in 2021. So that's my list of the top 5 games that I really got into this year. I also want to talk about some honorable mentions, some other games that I really got into, they just weren't enough to cut it to make it to the top 5. And the first one I wanted to mention was Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Dana. The gameplay and exploration is so good. The story isn't bad either, but it takes so damn long to get started. I'm talking like 30 hours for the story and gameplay to really open up. And the next honorable mention is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remake. Pro Skater 2 is a game I would consider that defined me as a gamer back in high school. I remember sleepless nights with friends just playing this for hours and hours. Needless to say, I was hyped for the Tony Hawk Pro Skater remakes, and like others on this list, it didn't disappoint. The only real negative I will have to say about it is that the online is lackluster, even after the updates that they came out with. And there's still no online horse mode, which is, in my opinion, one of the best, most undervalued mode in Tony Hawk Pro Skater series. So anyways, thanks a lot for watching. As I close this video, I just want to talk about my one friend who I mentioned in the Spelunky part of the video. If you go to the Wikipedia page for Shrug, He kind of resembles the guy they use on the stock photo to give an example of what a shrug is. I just want you to think about him, especially now during these times, the holiday times and everything, because he must have suffered brain damage because he keeps pulling this shit in Splunky all the damn time. You did that.
I didn't mean to.
You did that.
I know I did that.